Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Championship Weekend. We got press conferences with one coach and two players from each team coming up over the next hour plus, and we begin with Chicago head coach Dave Woods. Dave, thanks for being here. Let's just start simple. How does it feel to be back at Championship Weekend for the second straight year with the Chicago Union?
It feels great. It's quite an accomplishment any time, any year, any team that makes it this far through a grueling regular season to go through the divisional championship, the playoffs, and then the championship. It's great to be back at Championship Weekend. The team this year put in a lot of work in Chicago, and we are so glad that we earned the opportunity to be back here representing Chicago.
So the main thing I was curious to ask you about was how this team built its chemistry, because you weren't really a complete unit until the end of the season. How would you say you guys progressed and grew as the regular season went on, knowing that you were missing pieces? I mean, every team missing pieces throughout some point during the season, but you guys really became kind of the fullest form of yourself late in the year and in the playoffs.
Yeah, let's talk about that, Evan. I think it might have been you that kind of discredited us early on this year by saying things like, we don't have a complete team. We're losing so many key pieces. What is Chicago going to do? I think that we were a very complete team last year. I think that we could have used some adjustments last season. We didn't lose all that much. We retained a lot of our core players that you see this year. So we started out in a really good place this season, and then it was just fitting in some of the new pieces and figuring out where all of those pieces fit in as best as they could. So, I mean, we have a very long season, as everyone is aware. So the camaraderie, the team development, all of those things, they just happen week to week. And I'm glad to say that after a long, long season of games, meetings, hangouts, etc., our guys are finally peaking at the right time, which is supposed to be every team's goal. And so we are very fortunate that we have finally figured out how to put all of those pieces together and get everybody clicking at the right time.
Adam Ruffner and Daniel Cohen have talked and written quite a bit about the last couple games, your offense becoming a lot more possession-oriented, maybe not taking quite as many deep shots. I'm curious to know how much of that is intentional and concerted versus just being circumstantial based on how the game unfolds.
It's probably a combination of both. Some of our players have been coined as, coining themselves as shooters and bucket getters. I think that is still applicable. I think at least in terms of the last few games, it was a little bit circumstantial, given just who we had available and things like that. What I really liked during our divisional championship game, though, was that the O-line was able to identify what Minnesota's defense was trying to run, and they did a good job of adjusting to that and taking what was open. And so the offense became this sort of like seven-headed snake type thing where everybody could be a threat at one time or another. They take away one of the heads and there's six others that fill in that place. And I think that's what every O-line should aspire to do. And I'm glad to see that's what happened. And that's a great game to have going into Championship Weekend.
So you win on Sunday, and it's a pretty quick turnaround for you to play on Friday night against a team you've never played before. How familiar were you with the Colorado Summit when the clock struck 0 against Minnesota on Sunday, and what was it like preparing you and Sarah over the past 5 days to get ready for tonight?
Yeah, well, being that Colorado is an expansion team, I think that nobody was really that familiar with Colorado this season. We have been watching throughout the year, but something that we try to do as the Union is we think and worry about one game at a time. So we were keyed in for getting the win against Minnesota, and then, like you said, as soon as the time struck 0, it then was, okay, on to the next one. I am fortunate to say of my assistant coach that she is always prepared, always has a plan, and it only took her a short time of watching the Colorado Divisional Championship as well as a couple of their other games before the two of us together were, and with the captains, were able to come up with what we hope is a solid game plan going into tonight.
When you think back about your performance at championship weekend last season, what are the biggest learnings and things you want to stay mindful of heading into this weekend's championship weekend setting? Good
question. Yes. For those at home that don't remember, we made it all the way to overtime. Double overtime? One overtime. We made it all the way to overtime to lose in overtime. It was the most thrilling game of the weekend. And yes, there were definitely some key learnings to take away from that, which I'm glad to say we got that experience. Some things that we're going to try to be mindful of this season from last is making some different key adjustments, trying to identify which players have the hot hands, who's got the hot throws, putting out the appropriate lines, being ready to make those big game calls when the big game comes down to the line.
You talked about your game plan a little bit for Colorado. You feel like it's a solid plan. I'm curious what the process is like in the middle of the game. You know, as a coach coming into a game, if your game plan A doesn't work, what's the process like if you have to, throw it out the window? Because Colorado's got a lot of good players. They're multidimensional. How do you have a game plan B, C ready? Are you just going to see how it goes? Like, how's that process go throughout the beginning of the game?
Good question asked from a fellow coach. Yes, we have been working on contingency plans for when plan A does not work. We roll to plan B and plan C, etc. Like Evan said in his write-up this week, Colorado's a dynamic team, and they've got a lot of areas that they can beat you in. So we're going to have to – we've done our best to identify what those are and hopefully recognize right away who we think is going to be beating us. Is it this person? And then how do we adjust to that? So that's what we're hoping we have figured out.
Well, Dave, thanks for reading the write-up this week, and thanks for leading us off here at our AUDL Championship Weekend press conferences. Best of luck tonight against Colorado.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with Pavel Giannis in a moment. All right, Pavel.
Oh, God.
Thank you for being here. We are live. We never actually went away, I don't think. So everybody saw your awkward old man getting into the chair.
I'm old.
How is the body feeling right now heading into championship weekend?
Like a spry 22-year-old. That's me. A spry 22-year-old athletic cutter. It feels great.
What has made this 2022 Union season different for you than any other season of your career, either in terms of the teammates or how you've built chemistry or the flow of the season? What stands out to you about this year in particular?
Well, I felt 2021 was the first year where we had truly the best talent in Chicago play in the UDL. And I feel like this year is sort of a continuation of that. And last year we were building systems, we were building processes that kind of got us to championship weekend. And this year we're just tweaking and figuring out stuff, the last 10% of our execution. It wasn't a lot of building, wasn't a lot of institutional knowledge that we needed to implement. It's just tweaking stuff and really just a continuation of the good stuff that we already did in 2021.
You've been a winner. You've been selected for Team USA before. This team last year, like you said, made it to championship weekend. We've talked about how you came up short in the semifinal. In your estimation, a lot of people talk about teams learning to win. What are the lessons you've taken away in terms of hey, this is where we need to be going because I've done it before. How is this team going to move forward and learning to win for this weekend?
Well, you have to learn to lose first. I think in order to take anything away from a loss, you have to be humble and you have to understand that you will be back. And so first you have to learn how to lose and take away things from losses. I don't think learning to win is an issue for teams. I think it's a little unfair to call us, losers, or to say that we've never learned how to win. We just never did, we never did it at championship weekend. The club team hasn't performed as well in the recent years, at least not to our expectations, right? So we really have to, I think what the difference was how do we take away, lessons that we can learn in 2022 from 2019, from 2021. I think the biggest difference was, having done that, been there, and not really implementing that many new systems or things like what I just said. Like, it's just doing the same thing over and over again until it's like memory, until you don't think about doing it. So really just learning how to lose and taking away the best message and the best things out of that.
So you showed up to Colorado Summit tryouts.
Go Starbuds.
Early in 2022. Now you're facing this team. You're a past champion with Colorado Mama Bird, and this team is littered with Mama Bird alums and young Mama Bird talent. How close are you with any of the Mama Bird guys that are on this roster now, and what's the best smack talk you've had with any of them this week?
Well, I think Joe Smash Anderson is the king of talking smack and taking smack, so I'm really excited to match up against him. Hopefully he covers me, and hopefully I roast his butt all over the field. I don't think it'll be particularly close if he does guard me. Like all those guys, they're a little bit younger. They're a young team. Like, they're 22, 23-year-olds, studs that have, gone through the Mama Bird program, that are now just kind of getting into their own prime. And it's going to be really exciting to match up against other birdies. I just really want to win, to be honest. Like, I don't think I've ever been motivated to beat a group of guys and group of friends before. So this is kind of the epitome of my season for sure. Even if we do win or lose, this is going to be the best game that I think I've played.
I think it's very reasonable to expect Joe Smash to be on you at some points. I think Cody Spicer is also a guy who's going to be on you perhaps a bunch. Have you watched Cody on film? Are you familiar with his defensive game, and what do you expect with that matchup potentially?
I think if Cody's on me, I think they're wasting like one of their best defenders on someone who's not that influential. I don't think Cody's going to be guarding me. I think Cody's going to be guarding Paul Arders, or someone like Jeff, or someone like Ross maybe. I don't expect to see Cody at all. That's going to be a waste if that's what they do. And I hope they do that. I hope if any of the Summit people are watching, please put Cody Spicer on me so that we have 6 other defenders on our playmakers. That would be fantastic.
So earlier this week, you talked to Dan Hilton on the Empire podcast.
Sure did.
And you were very straightforward and quantitative in your answer and what it's going to take to win this weekend.
Right.
I think you said something like 80% offensive conversion, and your defense gets at least 15 chances.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How does that happen? I like the numbers. I like the benchmarks that you got to hit. I'll let you stick with just the offense.
Sure.
How does your offense get to 80% holds?
Well, I kind of want to stick with the defense, though. I think I want to talk about the defense first. I think defensively, if Colorado does come out and they do their high-powered, high-octane, nether cut, throw it deep offense, I feel like we need to be smart enough to get blocks on anything that's floaty, on any deep shots. And I know they're going to come out and try to end points early. So if we can get to those discs and get some blocks off of hucks, I think we'll get to 15. Hopefully they don't adjust. Hopefully they keep putting it. But if they do, we're going to be in trouble if they decide to possess the disc. Like, if they come out and do a North Carolina style offense and try to get to 400 completions by the end of the game, we're probably going to be in trouble. So if Colorado's watching this, please just run pull plays, zipper pull plays, so you can put it deep. Offensively, we've been here before. Like, we've been on this field. We've had this home crowd against us mostly, never with us. We've played on this field. We know what the wind is like. We've had bad games here. We've had good games here. So for us, it's just remembering what we did well in the times that we did win these games against the Radicals. And most of that time is just possessing the disc. Like, we didn't, we weren't really hucking. We've never really hucked very well at Breese Stevens. So possessing the disc, taking the easy shots, converting, and playing a little bit, more risk averse.
Speaking of now going back to the offense, having a really great year so far, there's a lot of tension on you. Paul Arders is incredible in a lot of ways too. The other guys though that have been filling in the line for the last couple of years, Kyle Rutledge, Jack Shanahan, Jeff Weiss. Can you speak to their abilities? Like, what makes them so good? Because sometimes, you see Jeff scoring deep, but a lot of times it looks like it's making the offense run smoothly. And what makes them good?
I mean, Jeff Wise is your prototypical bucket getter. I mean, the guy's a world-class player. Team USA, like I was surprised that people were caught off guard by how well he was going to play this year. Like, this guy is amazing. He was a Chicago Machine captain. Like, he's played offense before. So it's great. I think in the first couple of games, people didn't respect his game, but now they do. I mean, that guy's super fast. He can get up, super athletic, extremely motivated, and just a dog. So, I mean, Jeff Wise is now he's a known quantity. Hopefully they'll put a good defender on him. Kyle Rutledge is like a better me, in many sense. Like, he's way more versatile. He has all the throws in the book, and he's just super smart. He doesn't make any stupid mistakes, and he can actually get us the disc back after a turnover. So his versatility, I think really shows, and I think his game is very well suited to the AUDL. So go Kyle.
Pavel, we thank you for your time, and I wish you the best of luck and appreciate you dressing up for us.
Anytime. Let's do it again next year.
Pavel Giannis, ladies and gentlemen. Nate Goff is up next to finish off our conversations with members of the Chicago Union. Nate, get comfortable. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
What has this summer been like for you, like the last 5-6 months of making the World Games team, practicing, competing, also having an AUDL season to care about, life going on? Just how would you kind of characterize what these past 4, 5, 6 months have been like for you from an ultimate and life standpoint?
Yeah, it's been an absolute grind, absolutely, but it's been very fun to put so much into something with a team like we have here, and to feel so much fulfillment in that has been really special. Our team's great, very supportive on an individual level, and I felt a lot of support going to play with the U.S. team, even though I was obviously missing some games and some time with our team. And I'm glad that we are here, and hopefully we get to experience some of the joy I felt in July in Alabama this weekend.
So, first test this weekend, the only test that's guaranteed, is the Colorado matchup. What are the defensive keys going into that game that will enable you to experience that joy later in the weekend?
Wow, defensive keys. I mean, obviously, Nutt is a very special thrower in a way that we haven't seen in our division. His cutters can cut deep from 40 yards down the field, and that's something that we're not really used to. So adjusting to that and being ready for a team that's going to shoot the ball to the end zone with high frequency. But I think we're set up really well for that. We have a lot of very strong deep defenders, a lot of speed on defense. Asher Lance has been huge for us in the deep space this year. Nick Pappas of late, great athlete, great on the deep ball, and even some of our guys who maybe we don't think of as tall, deep defenders. Jason Valley and Jace Bruner have been killers there. So I think we're set up really well to play against this team, and I'm really excited for tonight.
You have a lot of new players kind of coming back into the lineup, really just for the playoffs. How do you take what happened last week and take steps forward, which is going to be required to play against the caliber competition you're going to see this weekend?
Yeah, that's a great question, Charlie. I hope we figured that out. It felt different on Sunday. That was the first time we had all our guys with Dalton and Joe and Tim and Jason and myself, and it was very different. I think, especially for Jason and I, there's been a high throwing load this year during most of the season, and now it's kind of a complete shift to we want to grind the ball. We want to make sure we're taking care of the disc on a turnover, and I think we can do that a lot better than we did on Sunday.
From practicing against your own team's offense, what are the things that they do that make life really difficult? And when you guys do win the battle of D-line versus O-line in practice, what needs to happen for the Union D to beat the Union O?
I would say something our offense does really well is they create big space, and then they have cutters who cannot be stopped when you're in that big space. There's no way to guard Ross Parker and Jeff Weiss two ways in a one-on-one matchup. You're just not going to win in that situation. So when they put you there on that island and they have a thrower like Paul Arders or Jack Shanahan with the ball, you really have to take the less dangerous option. I think when we've been successful is when they've thrown the ball away.
You've had a lot of growth in your career in terms of rising from South Carolina to now and making the World Games team. And I was curious about your development. Was that something that kind of happened naturally, or did you have role models that you've tried to model different parts of your game? Because in my estimation, you're a very versatile player that can do a lot of different things. So were you taking bits from different players, or is there somebody, one person, one player that you were like, I want to be that?
That's a great question, Brian. I think for me and for all our young guys, you want them to have role models at every level. In college, I had my role models as both like leaders and players. And, you know, when I moved to Chicago, I had different mentors. Like Walden Nelson has always been a big mentor for me, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And, you know, but I feel like I owe a lot of what I have now to those mentors along the way. And now it's like, how do we pay it back to our young guys? Because when you are like trying to break into this league or trying to break into the club scene, it's a lot of like grinding outside of practice, like just trying to make those tryouts, be prepared for those tryouts so you can make the team and have your shot to prove yourself. And sometimes like just that first opportunity on a team like this is all it takes. And we've kind of seen that this year with Jace Bruner and Asher Lance in particular, kind of really getting their first shot on the big stage.
Last question, Nate. Where is your World Games gold medal right now?
It's sitting on my desk, actually. I'm embarrassed to admit I'm a little messy in my room, especially with the chaos of the last few months. So, yeah, sitting on my desk. We'll have to figure out something else to do with it, though.
Really quick, you've been here before in the semifinals. You had a great game last year against Raleigh and slipped away late. What do you take from last year into this year?
I think we went into last year very satisfied that we had, like, making championship weekend felt like a massive achievement last year. And feeling that game slip away from us, I think, was a lesson that we belong here and, like, we can win this thing. So I think it's made us hungry in the past year.
Nate, thanks so much for joining us. Best of luck tonight against the Summit, and we'll see you later.
Yeah, thanks, Evan.
Nate Goff, Pavel Giannis, and Dave Woods representing the Chicago Union. Just a minute, we'll have members of the Colorado Summit joining us to talk about championship weekend. We are now joined by Tim Kafalis, one of the co-head coaches of the Colorado Summit. Tim, thanks for being here. Congrats on making it to championship weekend. And I just was curious to start with, too. I mean, I've talked to you a little bit throughout the season about the culture of buy-in and commitment that you and your fellow coaches have built. I mean, we've seen expansion teams do that in year one. We've seen expansion teams struggle to do that in year one. Can you talk about the keys to building that culture of commitment and buy-in for this first-year expansion team to be good enough to get here to this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think it started with team construction and even like pre-player team construction. The owners were super thoughtful with like coach selection, like who's involved with the team from the ground level up. Joe Smash Anderson, even though he's also a team player and captain, he's been involved with like the crafting of this team since before I was on board. So putting a premium on folks that are really integral to the Colorado Ultimate scene, really emphasizing culture at every step of the way, like thinking about motivations for people and people being involved and why that is. And then just reinforcing that, right? You can say all you want at the beginning, but if you don't reinforce it as you go throughout your practices, your tryouts, your games and everything, if you don't keep that centered, it can drift away pretty quick. So we're pretty happy with how it's manifested, and it's really an honor to be here this weekend, and it's kind of a testament to all the cultural work that folks have put in since December.
TK, whether you've been nice enough to give me a few minutes before a Summit broadcast or answering some of Evan's questions for the Tuesday toss, you've talked a lot about how you like to have your defense increase the cognitive load on the imposing offense, and how you believe that accumulates as you get later into the game. Can you talk about specific ways in which your defense does that, and how you kind of get your unit to manifest that on the field?
Well, it all comes down to whether or not we're executing what we're trying to do. So that's step one, if we can execute. But the core idea is to work against the other team's flow, which we can't always do because offensive players in this league and others are amazing. So thinking about how they want to attack in sequence, what the patterns are, and then how you can disrupt them. Really good players are going to recognize the disruption and play through it. Really good players, even at the highest levels, as fatigue wears on, as a lot of dynamics change throughout the course of a game, can have slip-ups. And I think our overall philosophy is if we can make every look, every throw at least a slight higher degree of difficulty harder, we give our D more chances to get blocks. We make it a little bit more challenging for the other team to have easy completions. Our goal is just make them work, whether that's physically or really processing the field in front of them.
So you talked about culture, and just kind of recapping, the season has been pretty awesome, I think, for an expansion team to be here and to be in this moment. How has your team dealt with the limited amount of adversity that it's faced? 18-18 against Salt Lake. How are you setting them up culturally to deal with adversity potentially for this championship weekend?
That's a great question. I think early in the season, when we were still kind of finding our feet and figuring out the league, some of the rule changes and all of that, we learned a lot in those first 2 or 3 games about the pacing, and we faced a little bit of adversity then, and then kind of hit our stride, and we're cruising a bit more. A couple of bumps, lost to San Diego, but I think the key is that we believe it's easy to maintain culture when you're winning, right? That's the reality. If you're doing well, it's hey, we're all supporting each other, but you're winning, so that's a piece of cake. But I'm really confident in the group that we have, that whether or not we're winning, whether or not we're up or down, that folks are going to support each other, that folks are going to represent Colorado, that we're not going to be a team that if we face some adversity, if we go on runs of playing poorly or getting broken or not being able to put defensive pressure on, that we will respond in positive ways. And even last week against Salt Lake is a pretty back and forth game, but when Salt Lake's going on their runs, the team responded in the ways that we needed to. So confident that whether or not we're cruising or whether or not we're being cruised on, might be a word, that we can respond in positive ways.
Feels like a kind of a strength on strength coming up with your offense's deep game ability going up against a group of Chicago deep defenders that's very strong. Does that change the game plan at all for you, or do you really look at this as, we know that we have great throwers and great cutters, and we're going to be able to get open even on those kinds of players?
We've got a really strong deep game, but our offense is dynamic and intelligent enough that we're going to be able to play, the most appropriate thing relative to what's in front of us, meaning that we don't need to huck to have effective offense. I think the ability of our throwers, especially not to take the top off of the defense, opens up a lot of the underneath pieces. And our core of offensive players is dynamic enough that we can threaten, deep. We can threaten under the Portland game, the last Portland game we played where we didn't have Nut. I think it was showcasing a bunch of young, mostly Mama Bird guys that are pretty amazing players, would be that hey, if we want to, we can just move the disc side to side and take easy passes and whatnot. So the ability to do all of those in tandem, I think, is what will allow us to adapt to what's a really, really good Chicago defense, period, especially deep D, though. Yeah.
Couple games this season, you guys have managed to, over the course of a same game, put together 1 or 2 spectacular quarters, and I think 1 or 2 quarters where maybe you didn't necessarily play up to your potential. Maybe alluding to some of those runs that other teams have been able to put on you. What are the keys to putting together a consistent 4-quarter effort here at Championship Weekend?
Yeah, I think it's the ability to be a little bit more dynamic when we need to be, not a little more proactive with adjustments we need to make, both offensively and defensively, not kind of bang our heads into the wall of like, hey, we're going to keep doing this defensively even though we haven't had pressure because we're going to do it better, be a little more dynamic in that. And then offensively, if a team is effectively taking away any element of our offense, be it a deep game, be it personnel, be it, underneath game, whatever, that we can be more proactive with that adjustment beforehand. But I'm confident, again, that, even if we're running into some quarters that are bumpier, that we'll be able to respond and figure out what needs to get corrected and get there.
This is kind of a question about like offensive style. When you look across the league right now and you see kind of Carolina, they're running like a heavy give-go, like these triangle with the handlers that are moving it really rapidly. When I watched your game against Salt Lake, it seemed like you have the throwers to throw really long swings across the field. Was that intentional design choice? Is that something you really like to do, or is that something that kind of came out organically?
As far as the specifics of
designing your offense, yeah.
Designing our offense around the ability to have throwers that can throw long swings. No, I think we had a pretty good sense of, what kind of offensive skill sets we had coming in. Like, we didn't know who all was going to be on the team, but we had an idea. A lot of guys have a Mom Bird background where they run a similar type of offense, from Mike Lund. So it wasn't so much like, hey, we've got this, like, dynamic break mark throwing ability, the ability to, like, really reset this whole wide 53-yard field. But I think we've leaned into that ability as something that we can do as we've kind of really found our own offensive identity throughout the season.
TK, be interesting to pick your brain for hours, but we'll leave it there. Thank you for your time. Best of luck tonight against Chicago. Tim Kafalis of the Colorado Summit. Jonathan Nethercutt will join us next. Hey, John. Good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks, Evan.
Were you and Pavlo just having some very passive-aggressive trash talk back there? What was going on?
Oh, that's a good question. It probably. It's hard to tell. I think we both ride the line of serious / not serious. So it could have been passive-aggressive. I think you would probably require 2 answers to really figure out whether it was or not. So.
What has this season been like for you? You've played in the AUDL a bunch with the Flyers. You were here championship weekend as a member of the Growlers, a team that you just kind of had a little cameo with. This year, you were part of this building this culture, and you played almost every game and had a lot of success. What has the season been like for you at the whole, and what has made it successful?
Yeah, it's been really cool, Evan. Obviously last year was a fun experience to kind of be kind of a hired gun just for the last 2 or 3 games of the year. The challenge to that is it's obviously cool to show up and be able to play with the team, but you also don't get to build with the team. I think the one cool thing about this year and playing with the Summit is we've got to build with the team the whole year. We've got to improve. I don't think anyone after the Seattle-Portland road trip, even on our team, was like, wow, we're playing our best Ultimate here. So it's been really cool to be part of the program as we've gotten a lot better and figured our stuff out. And it's really cool to see it go from our first road trip where we were pretty sloppy but came out with 2 wins to a point where I think we're all pretty happy with how we're playing.
Now we can look at the stats, how many completions, how many yards you have, completed hucks. I would like to hear you describe in your own words how you view your responsibility within the construct of the Summit offense, what the most important things you view as foundational to what you need to do on the field, and then what the keys are offensively against Chicago tonight.
Yeah, I think the big things is orchestrating a little bit verbally is part of it, helping with adjustments on the line and talking about things we need to pay attention to. Also, like off ball, using my voice to help direct traffic where I can. More in terms of like physical tool set, I think a lot of it has to do with trying to stretch the field with my throws, whether that's by actually doing it or just being able to threaten it. We've got a really good host of receivers downfield. Jay, obviously, Quinn has been a great asset all year and one of our best players. Matt Jackson's awesome, and Thomas Brewster have all been like really good about opening up the field. So I think a lot of my job is just being able to threaten whatever they're attacking in terms of space, and then being able to actually get them the disc when they counter or actually get open in those spaces. So sometimes that works. Sometimes we end up playing a little bit more defense, but that's kind of how it goes.
How do you anticipate this matchup with Chicago being different than the matchup with Salt Lake? from the offensive side?
I think we expect to see probably a little bit more poach schemes probably early in set plays. One thing Salt Lake does really well is they definitely do a slight amount of like poaching and help defense to try to gum up your set plays, but it's a lot of like back pocket tight defense. Chicago definitely will play that too. They've got a lot of great person defenders, Nate Goff being obviously one that everyone knows the name of. I think one thing they probably do especially well is they play a little bit more team defense and probably spend a little less time like committing to a lot of your cuts and tend to, I think, have a more laid out team strategy in terms of what sections of the field they're trying to work you into and how they're kind of going to create leverage as a defense as a team rather than just 7 individual matchups across the board. So I think we just plan to see a little bit more of a tactical approach from Chicago while also supplementing that with great person defenders.
I want to zoom out a little bit. If you look at championship weekend as a whole, we have New York, Carolina, and Chicago who are all here last year, and then Colorado, obviously, in your first year. I'm curious, as a leader on this team, how you take your personal experience playing at this tournament before and translate that to get your team, most of whom hasn't been here before, ready to play.
Yeah, I think the main thing is maybe not just championship experience here, and Jay and Maddie both have been here at this same weekend before, and I think all that stuff helps in terms of if you haven't been in games like this or you haven't been in settings like this, just having people around you that have goes a long way in terms of confidence, how relaxed those players are, and just familiarity with the setting. With that said, I think it's a lot of it's just like I don't think I'm going out of my way verbally or anything like that to like speak to the team. I think it's just, and credit to Jay, I think he does the same thing. We just go about our business kind of like we always do, and I think that kind of gives an impression to the rest of the team that to treat it like every other game. Bigger stage, of course, and obviously the 3 of the best teams in the league will be potentially dealing with over the weekend. But I think the big thing is just treating it like business as normal. So.
John, I was curious to ask you about Danny Landisman. You know, he played a couple of years in this league with LA, primarily as an O-line cutter, and I'm not sure how familiar you were with him before you started playing with him, kind of after his college season wrapped up, and obviously he's been with you in the backfield as a handler primarily. What have you seen from him, and how has he surprised you or confounded any expectations you might have had?
Yeah, I mean, Danny's an impressive player. He's young by even, I think, Colorado standards in terms of we have a fairly youthful team, and even he's young. With that said, he's been playing a long time, and I think you can see that. He certainly doesn't play like a college player in a lot of ways. He's got a lot of poise. He never really seems too bothered by the moment. I think the biggest thing is a lot of people, when he was playing for LA and early in his career, as his name was kind of becoming popular, I think people view him as a dominant downfield player, whether that's catching and distributing or maybe scoring deep goals. I think the biggest thing is Danny's proven to everyone over the past few months that he's a complete player. He's super solid in the backfield. He can also move down. You saw in the Salt Lake Western Division final that we just pushed him downfield in the 4th quarter, and he excelled there. So I think showing that he's a complete player, he's well-rounded, you can kind of slot him anywhere you need, and that he also has the ability to, depending on how you're playing him, changing his game and adapting it to find where his strength is, and that's a pretty valuable person to have in your toolkit. So I've just been really impressed with him. So.
Over the last 5 years, West Division teams have not fared very well at championship weekend. What's going to make this year different?
Great question, Charlie. Hopefully us is what makes this year different. I think in a lot of ways, like, we've got a good structure. A lot of these guys have played college together and played club together. I think we have plenty of guys like Matt and Jay and myself who have been in these situations before, and I don't know how true that's been of all Western Division teams. That said, it wasn't that long ago that Western Division teams were the king of this weekend. They're back-to-back champions, so recent struggles doesn't necessarily denote that Western Division teams don't have the talent to make it here. So, I mean, by that standard, there are a lot of teams in divisions that have struggled here, including the Central Division. So, yeah, maybe a little bit of luck and hopefully a lot of good play will be the difference in that. But, yeah, I think we feel pretty good about our chances.
Last thing, John, if you're fortunate enough to win the first semifinal today, I imagine it'll be a lot of fun for you to sit back and watch the Flyers and the Empire. You have a lot of former teammates on both those teams. What will it be like to watch that game tonight?
It'll be a lot of fun. I had a thoroughly enjoyable time last year watching it from the stands. It's nice to sit back. You don't get a lot of opportunities while you're playing in the league to enjoy a game like that as a spectator. It'll be a fun game. I'll be pulling for Raleigh plus Jack and Ryan. So I'll have some individuals to cheer for on New York and a whole team to cheer for on Raleigh. So I think it'll be a fun time to kind of troll and heckle in the crowd.
Alrighty. Well, enjoy the day. Best of luck tonight. Thank you for joining us, John.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Jonathan Nethercutt of the Colorado Summit. And Jay Frood is around here somewhere. Where's Jay? Here comes Jay. What's up, Jay? What's up, guys? Make yourself comfortable. Joined by Jay Frood, staring right in the sun. You should have gotten a pair of sunglasses from somebody, but all good. How does it feel to be back here at Breese Stevens Field again, where your AUDL career started?
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, it's changed so much since the last time I've been here. I was noting some of the buildings that have come up. These high rises that were here weren't here the last time I was here. So it's kind of cool to see the city kind of popping up and developing a little bit more. And it'll be nice to see some of the crowd too. I'm excited to see what kind of crowd we get for our game and the second semifinal. But yeah, I'm excited. It's going to be fun.
So between you and Dave Wiseman, there's a lot of Radicals reps on the Summit. Do you think that might get the crowd on your side tonight against the hated rivals from Chicago?
Hopefully. I think we can still play on their good side. They probably miss us a little bit, but I think they'd rather cheer for us than for Chicago, since we're a little farther away than down the road. So,
Jay, how would you characterize the identity of the Summit offense? You've been such an important figure, churning downfield, keeping things continuing, finishing plays, but how do you characterize the unit as a whole?
I think a good word to describe our offense is versatile. I think everyone is we're all pretty selfless in the fact that we all just go out there and play, and whoever gets it, gets it. And I think that's one of our biggest advantages, is that we have 7 people that can do everything on the field. So it's reassuring that regardless of who's out there, we are confident in our O-line and putting away scores and holds.
You've played here at Breese Stevens plenty. How do you help prepare the team to play in this stadium specifically? Like how it's different than playing in Colorado, like what the vibe is like here. Obviously the air is different here at lower altitude. So how do you help get the team ready for that?
I mean, it's just gearing everybody up and ready for the game, right? I mean, it's everyone's focus is on winning the championship, but it's one game at a time, 1 point at a time. It's pretty cliche to say, but it's no different than a home game, right? We're going to have a crowd. We're going to have people here. We've had great crowds all year at home, so hopefully that this one will just be just as fun. But I don't think there's anything preparation-wise that we need to do to get ourselves ready, but I think everyone's just itching to play and just be out there on the field. So.
Jay, I think it was a little over a month, maybe close to 2 months ago, that you pulled your hamstring in a game. How scary was that? I mean, you put in so much to the season. Things are going well. Hamstrings can linger.
Yeah.
What was that injury like for you, and how did you get better to be at the point where you're ready to go today and last week?
Yeah, I mean, pulled my hamstring. Pretty unfortunate circumstances. Playing a game, it's just low sleep, doubleheader weekend. So it was a lot on the line, but. You got to take care of yourself first and foremost. So I haven't been able to practice with professional teams just because I've been out of state, and now I'm finally able to have home games and have practices regularly. So I think just the toll of playing more Frisbee across the weeks just kind of drained me, and I wasn't able to take care of myself as much as I could have. But now that I've taken some time off, taken some rest, really strengthened my just body in general, I'm good to go. I'm ready to get out there and run around and hopefully play 2 games.
When you think about this Chicago defense and matchup, what's the first thing from their defensive group that comes to mind?
Nate Goff.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I
what
mean,
Nate does.
Yeah, he's just a big explosive player. You know, coming off pretty great year for himself, and super proud of him. Really cool to see him kind of flourish into that USA team, World Games team, and then having the defensive prowess to be on a championship level team as well for the Union. So yeah, I'm not nervous, but I'm excited to play, I guess, to see how it is. I don't know who his matchup is. I hope it's me, but yeah, it should be a good battle regardless. So.
Jay, last thing, there are a lot of known commodities on this Summit team, but there are also some guys who weren't as well known. Which guys have you most enjoyed, playing with and kind of watch have their moments? I mean, Seth Farris is a guy that comes to mind. Brewster and Brunker, I think of kind of in that group. Maybe you can talk a little bit about them or some other guys on this Summit team that maybe have really shown up big this year as new names.
Yeah, I mean, so coming from out of the state of Colorado, I didn't know a whole lot of these Mama Bird guys from CU. But yeah, I think Brunker has been amazing all year. He's just a workhorse. He just runs around and just never stops grinding. So it's great to have somebody like him on the field. First time playing with Cody Spicer. He's obviously not an unknown name, but he is just another one of those guys that you want to emulate when you get on the field. He's just a guy that just keeps going, picks your teammates up, and really holds down the defensive stalwart for those other teams. Some of our younger guys, Seth is a great example of somebody that's really blossomed into a great player. John and Josh Morris are pretty young. Some of my good friends from back in Missouri, and they've been shining out this year, trying to get their feelers underneath them and see what it's like on the pro circuit. And then not even just like some of our practice players are even doing a great job of just like bringing the intensity at practice and helping us get better as a unit. And then, being rewarded by playing, a couple of games here and there. So I think just in general, like our squad is so young and it's so fun to just be around a bunch of guys that are, energetically like ready to make the jump into the game or make the next big play and keep everyone going.
Great stuff, Jay. We'll let you go. Thanks for being here. Best of luck tonight against Chicago.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. Have a good one.
Thanks to Jay Frood, Jonathan Nethercutt, and Tim Kafalis. We'll take a quick break, and then we'll move to the second game of the night. Members of the New York Empire are here and ready to join us. Stand by. Charlie Hoppus of the New York Empire joins us. Charlie, back at championship weekend for the second straight year. You guys narrowly made it last year, and this year had an even more exciting finish. In the 6 days since you guys beat the DC Breeze, what have kind of been your big takeaways from that second half, where you guys were pushed to a place where you hadn't really been all season long?
First off, yeah, good to be back. First time in Madison, which I've wanted to go to a game here since the team started. And last night I was watching the 2016 semifinal to get ready because I've watched all the tape of these teams that I can. So, just excited to be here. I'm glad that you all have these lights here in case the sun burns out. We'll be all set. The DC game, I think, obviously a little bit more stressful than we wanted it to be down the stretch. But it was a good thing. I think even before they brought the game close, there were things that we learned. And a team like DC can do that, right? They'll push you, they'll make you better. All these games are going to do that. And we learned some stuff about ourselves and how we want to approach. And I think, there's some stuff that DC did that I think Carolina, and if we move on, one of the other teams will be able to replicate to some degree and put their own flavor on it. And that's obviously, good for them, but it's good for us that we got some reps working against that, against a really strong team in DC.
So this is kind of a two-part question here for you. When you look across this team, who, number one, has been kind of the most improved or biggest surprise for this roster? You added a lot of players that are just like names already. And then two, who's the funniest player on the Empire?
I think the low-key funniest is John Lithio. Who like basically never speaks, but when he speaks, he says just like the funniest like slam dunk thing, and then like if you're lucky, somebody else will say it again just louder, and they'll laugh about. So yeah, John definitely is, at least in the writers' room of the New York Empire. He wrote the line about the lights. So yeah, John, funniest. I think most improved is real tough. Obviously a lot of guys last year was their first year, coaching staff included, and all those guys got measurably better, both statistically and even just within the culture of the team. And if you watch the games and you don't even notice the stats, it's visible, the comfort level. The 4 O-line guys that started for the first time last year, Osgar, Lithio, Saul, and Elliott, huge steps up by all 4 of them. I think Marquez has looked stronger. I think Jeff is in a better place than last year, which is terrifying. Just hard to pick. And I think when you're in a place with a lot of talent and a lot of people working hard, it's hard not to get better.
So when we talk about all that talent, it's no secret this franchise has invested in bringing the best and top players from around the country, getting them to be a part of the program. But then you and your coaching staff have to get all of those incredibly talented, incredibly accomplished players to buy into a team vision and buy into the strategic game plan.
Yeah.
What is that like?
Yeah, obviously a lot of individual brilliance by myself and Nunez, that's the forefront. But no, they it's really easy. It seems like it would be complicated, right? A lot of talent, a lot of egos, and somebody in the league, when we signed Charles Weinberg, tweeted out something like, well, there's only, I don't know what they're going to do. There's only one disc. Like, what are they going to do with all these stars? All these stars just like want to win, and when you have a team that's as talented, everybody has to sacrifice, right? Like everybody is giving up some touches, everybody's giving up. We've got maybe 5-6 guys that could be clear-cut all-stars or even MVP candidates if they were on another team that have lower numbers because of the role that they're being asked to play here, and that's the top of our roster. If you look at the middle of our roster, that is true. There's players we have on our first D-line. 6 of those players have played a full season on an O-line somewhere else or on the Empire in a year past. And then 3 players on our second D-line have played full seasons in the AUDL on an O-line, and they're just doing work and grinding on. And even on our O-line, Jeff would prefer to play D. People are just doing what is asked of them, and so it's when that's the case and when that's the mentality, and people are that humble's not even right, like hungry. They just want to win, and it's again very easy to the buy-in exists. It's very easy to just pull levers, and people do whatever if they think it's going to help the team win.
Statistically, you can see that your D-line is very good offensively.
Yeah.
And we know that you've added depth. The big question that I have for you, last time you saw Raleigh, you only got 2 break chances. You got the break on the first point of the game, and then you only had 1 more chance the rest of the way. What do you have to do different from a strategic perspective to get more chances? I mean, that's obviously an atypically excellent performance even for a very good Raleigh team, but still, I mean, something's going to have to change compared to last year's title game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not going to give you, X's and O's secrets or anything like that. Although, it's not terribly complex things. You'll be able to sniff it out in the first half of the game, or the things we're trying to accomplish. What I'll say is, last year's team is as good as a D-line as we had. We were last in the whole AUDL in turnovers generated per game in the whole league. And part of that is, our O-line's not having a bunch of long back and forth points, but our D-line just didn't create break chances last year. 25th is last. It's very bad. This year that number's, I think, very close to the top. We're at the top of the league. The personnel changes are part of that. Some of our mentality shifts, X's and O's shifts, are part of that. I don't know. We obviously, like I said, we have some specific adjustments for this specific game, but I think we're just in a better place holistically than we were this time last year.
A guy that we don't talk as much about with the Empire is also the guy who has the most blocks in the history of the league, and will be playing in his 18th AUDL playoff game today. That's more than anyone in the history of the league. How is Mike Draw still doing it, I believe, at 33 years old?
I'm so glad I get to talk about Mike Drost. Another great example, leading block getter and playing as good a defense as he's played in the last number of years. And we asked him to sort of create some flexibility for our line management, for him to learn how to handle. And, he has not handled before in the past, maybe on some summer league teams or something. I guess I didn't really ask. But he's been a handler on our second D-line, and it's allowed for us to be very flexible. He's such a versatile defender. He can guard all three layers at a really top level and bother even the best players at those respective levels on the field. And then to have somebody like that we can have as a reset handler and disc mover, I don't believe he has a turnover this season in a brand new role, handling for the first time in the AUDL. So unbelievable. And of course, it's not like he forgot how to cut. If we decide to, stack up on some other handlers elsewhere, he's certainly played a number of important points for us, including in the DC game on our first D-line. Again, it sort of goes back to that level of sacrifice and buy-in just for the greater good. Mike's amazing.
Last thing, Charlie, you've said to me and others that you haven't had to break the glass and go to your kind of secret emergency plans of crossing over superstars. Is this the game where you finally break that glass, and what are the things that you will see on the field that will indicate whether you need to break the glass, and can you share what some of those glass breaking options are?
Sure. I mean, I don't think again, without getting into too many specifics, we've got the reigning MVP playing on our D-line. We've got, one of the consensus best defensive players in the league in Jeff Babbitt playing on our O-line. We've got the reigning Callahan winner on a D-line. I think one thing that Carolina does especially well is generate handler pressure. John Randolph is somebody that can get open in a phone booth. Is that the saying? Love cliches. So yeah, he's just sort of an auto reset, whether that's in the backfield or even upfield. Really hard to contain, especially on a field this big. So lots of levers. And then you saw both Yacht and Jack play 30 points at various points in last year's playoffs. Those guys can run forever. Just a lot of versatility. And I think which of those levers gets pulled is going to be dictated by the game situation for sure.
Great stuff. Charlie, thank you for your time as always. Best of luck tonight against the Flyers.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks so much, y'all.
Ryan? All right, we're now joined by Ryan Osgar, who is experiencing the sun of our seat. We thank you for enduring this, and thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
Let's dive right into your worst game of the season last weekend. What happened against DC? How have you kind of dealt with it internally over the past week, and what do you expect tonight to be different?
How have I dealt with it? Yeah, it's just been kind of analyzing what went wrong and figuring out where those mistakes were. We got the W, so that's really all that mattered. But just figuring out kind of what what my role is against the schemes we're going to see, because we think they're probably going to be somewhat similar to how Breeze played us, and just figuring out what is best for our offensive system and how to fit into that. So that's been it, yeah.
Where are you most comfortable in an offense? Like, would you prefer to be catching the centering pass and getting things moving? Would you prefer to be initiating right out of the split stack or whatever? Like, what's your ideal dream offensive position?
Yeah, I would say that for most of my career, I've basically been an initiator for the most part. But teams don't really let me do that very easily anymore. They generally will just front me and try to push me out. So I think probably most comfortable is almost being like a fill cutter these days, or being center too. That's probably the easiest thing to do. But yeah, kind of going back to your first question, like realistically, I'm going to be trying to cut deep a lot more and be more of a threat downfield to exploit any fronting that happens this game.
So there's a lot of talk about you and Jeff and Ben and Jack. Solomon Rushmeyer-Bailey has had a fantastic season statistically, and Elliot Chartuk, I think, while he hasn't thrown necessarily as many yards this year, has really been a stabilizing presence. Can you speak to the two handlers, Saul and Elliot, and kind of how they've changed from last year to this year?
Yeah, that's an easy one. They've kind of just had a lot more time to build chemistry with one another. They've been, working hard at practice. I mean, I think most of last year we were kind of shuffling around who was in the handler set for our team. So just getting a whole another year's worth of reps under their belt has been huge for chemistry, and just figuring out like what each other like and all that good stuff. And I think that's kind of the biggest part of it. And I just think they're just getting more comfortable, and another year of high competitive action is, just made them a little bit sharper.
Evan wanted to focus in on last week's playoff game. I want to zoom out a little bit and just go back to the title game last year. What do you take from that experience? What sticks out to you as key learnings from that championship game appearance?
That's a good question. I would say that we have to play more as a unit, and we kind of all have to just do more of our role. I think last year, I know for myself personally, I felt a little bit of pressure to try to do too much, I think. And I think that for us to be successful, we have to be more dynamic as a team and have everyone do their part on the offense, as opposed to any one individual trying to do too much, especially against a really good defensive team who's going to have a good defensive scheme against us.
What do you see as the ways that this year's offense has improved compared to last season? It was a good offense last year, but it's clearly taken a step forward. Your play, a big part of that. But, broadly, is it personnel? Is it just comfort level? What's made this year's O-line so strong?
I think it's been discipline for the most part. Just general stinginess with the disc, and then priority on doing that throughout the year. I mean, it remains to be seen, really. I mean, it's always hard to say, like, our offense has been very good, but we haven't played a lot of teams who have really pushed us really hard. And, last week we played the Breeze and we didn't play so well. So we'll see tonight if that's true, if our offense is really, really good when we were tested in that way. And I think we can be. But I think that for the most part, it's just people having willingness to do the right thing as opposed to trying to make a big play and kind of taking it slow. I think we've gone away from playing more like huck and hope type of offense and playing a little bit more small ball and possession-based offense. And I think those are probably the reasons why we've been more efficient.
Well, speaking of huck and hope, I wanted to get your perspective of that last point from Saturday against DC. I feel like I remember watching the replay, you kind of looking up and seeing Ben making the grab. Can you just I've heard Jack's perspective, I've heard Ben's perspective. I'm curious to hear your perspective of what it was like, the conversation on the line, and how that point unfolded, and just what your perspective was as you saw Ben, the disc coming in, and where you saw everything.
Yeah. On the line, we were just kind of talking about our strategy, and I think we had a lot of confidence because we've beaten DC on buzzer beaters a lot. So I think we just kind of laughed, and we were disappointed because we were in that position to begin with, because we were up by so much and we kind of threw it away. So we had confidence going in. We were a little frustrated, but we just drew up our play, and it was try to get Jack with the disc because he's the best at throwing jump balls on our team, and then try to go attack the opposite side of the field. So we were able to do that perfectly. We drew it up. And then when Ben came down with it, I was so relieved. Like you said, it was probably my worst game of the year. I had a couple turns that I really wish I could get back. So I was just like so unbelievably relieved that we won that game. I can't imagine how I would be feeling if we would have lost that one. So I gave Benny a big hug and just like, thank God he's 6'7" or whatever he is.
When the disc was coming in, did you think he was going to make the play?
I saw that he had a really good position on it. You know, it's kind of hard to tell in that moment who was going to come down with it. It's always like not the person who's in the middle of the mess, really. It's always like like me last year. Like I was just like on the outside, and Ben was on the outside this time. You know, he had the right angle. It's really cool. I think in the moment I didn't really know what was happening. It's kind of all happening very fast. But going back and watching, you can see Ben runs from the front of the thing all the way around to the very back of the stack, and just kind of stands there and waits, and it just comes perfectly to him. So yeah, I mean, he just read it really well, and he took a really, really smart position on the play.
No secret about the relationships you have with all the guys on the Carolina Flyers, given your experience winning Club Nationals with Ring of Fire. Very quickly, best trash talk, friendly wager, anything like that you've had with any of those Flyers guys this week?
Probably just Mike D. He sends a lot of really interesting texts to me and Jack. But those guys don't do a lot of trash talking, I'm not going to lie. I mean, I haven't really seen a ton of them. There's a couple guys who I think will talk a little bit more trash, but for the most part, they're just very friendly dudes, and I'm good friends with them. So haven't really made too many wagers, but we got some time until game time, so I'm sure something will come up.
All right, Ryan, congrats on being back here at Championship Weekend. Thanks for joining us, and good luck tonight.
Thanks, guys.
Ryan Osgar will be followed up by Jack Williams here momentarily. Jack. Well, Jack, you've been on every podcast, it seems like, in the Ultimate World over the past week, so we had to bring you here.
What's one more?
Yeah, thanks for doing this other interview. I have not seen the Empire sandals before, Jack. We
One
can't
of a
see
kind.
them, but
I know I didn't wear any Empire stuff. So
well, I asked to wear Empire gear, and you came through. There's the Empire sandals.
There we
go. What is it like hanging out with, friends, former teammates, and guys you'll be competing against later today in a setting like this? I mean, the last half hour, it's been you and Eric and Saul and Mike Dinardis and Jonathan Nethercutt just all kind of hanging over there, and you guys are going to be competing for a championship under really intense conditions later today.
Yeah, it's a great time, honestly. It's something I've gotten more used to over the years. I think the first time it was a little weird. I think in 2019 when I went to Raleigh, I was like, oh, it's weird being on the other side, but no, it's nothing but fun and good laughs, and it's an awesome opportunity to just be able to like hang out with them, share some laughs, and it's easier to now separate sort of pre-game from sort of the intensity that we're going to find in the game. So yeah, it's cool to be able to have so many friends when you come to these events, and yeah, it's not awkward at all anymore. It's only a good time.
It's been a real luxury for New York to be able to have you playing in a little bit of a smaller role in a lot of games this season.
Yeah.
But when the games get important, we see you touch the disc a lot. We saw it against DC. We saw it last year in the final. What do you expect your role to be in today's game? Are you anticipating needing to handle a lot?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, luckily the coaching staff and the offense sort of gives me the freedom to sort of go and do whatever I feel like is needed and what is best. So, yeah, I think usually in those tighter moments, I feel more comfortable sort of getting a lot of the touches and hopefully like dictating the pace of play. But again, like, if everything feels like it's flowing smoothly, I feel totally fine just sort of getting out of the way. And we have so much talent on this team that a lot of the times I feel like I don't have to do too much. It's just sort of in tighter moments when I feel like I have an opportunity to go get the disc and be the release valve, I'm able to go do that. But yeah, I don't have a sort of a predetermined style of play that I'm going to be doing going into the game. It's just going to be kind of feeling it out and seeing how they're playing me and sort of seeing what kind of defenders they're putting on me. If they put more handler defenders on me, I feel more comfortable going downfield and vice versa. So yeah, no real plan outside of just sort of feeling it out once the game starts.
So kind of building off that, what are the most important things that you can control to be successful in this game? Checking in with yourself like, hey, yeah, I'm doing this, or hey, yeah, I'm responding to this well. What
what's the most important thing for you to be successful tonight?
Yeah, I think, personally and as a team, I think on offense, we're at our best when we're very vocal on and off the field. So sometimes in the tighter moments, our offense can sort of communicate less, and I think that's when we sort of get in trouble. And the more we communicate on the field, and then also when we get off sort of in between the points, I think that's usually when we're sort of at our best. So yeah, just being sort of a vocal leader, telling people that I'm clearing, or I'm on stage to cut, or I'm getting out, or I'm going to be in the handler space, and then off the field sort of talking about what we're seeing out there, talking about some of the adjustments that we can make. That's usually when that's usually when we're at our best, is when we find a good rhythm of sort of noticing tendencies that the defenses are doing, and sort of finding a counterattack to that.
Jack, if you do cross over and play defense like we've seen you do in big games in the past, which members of the Flyers O-line are you most excited to cover, and what experiences do you have guarding them in the past?
Yeah, I think usually when I do go crossover, trying to save a little bit of legs, I'll probably guard more of a handler, or like a less there's so many fast athletes on the at least on the Raleigh side that it can be a little bit exhausting to guard. So I anticipate maybe going on solid gooch a handful of times, just sort of hopefully kind of lock down some resets, and also not burn out my legs too much, assuming that they score and then I have to go on for the next offensive point. But if it gets really late in the game, I imagine Eric would cross over to O-line. Maybe I would take that matchup once or twice, sort of really late in the game. But I haven't thought too much about it, and I think it'll sort of be obvious in the moment. But I think that's sort of what feels most natural.
All right, last thing, your third straight trip championship weekend. You won the title, obviously, in 2019. Your first year with the Empire. Last year, the Flyers edged you in the finals. What were your biggest takeaways from that game? We've asked Ryan and Charlie about it, too. But from your perspective, what stood out most to you, and what are the things that you've thought about from that matchup last year that you're looking to switch around this year?
Yeah, I think I don't know. Overall, it's just a very, very clean game, and what stood out the most was that mistakes were really amplified at the highest moments. And both teams are extremely talented, and so possession of the disc is extremely important, and you have to really value the disc. And I think we did a pretty good job of that. But I think, honestly, last year, we broke them the first point of the game, and then we didn't break them for the rest of the game. So I think our defense is in a much better spot this year to sort of apply a lot more pressure and hopefully get them to turn the disc a little bit more. But on the offensive side, we just got to take care of business and sort of possess the disc that we know we can, and hopefully that'll be enough. But regardless, I think we both know it's going to be a close game in the end.
I know I said last thing, but we got Mike Dinardis coming up next. What's the most annoying thing he's texted you this week?
He'll I don't know. We've messaged back and forth. Nothing too annoying. Just a couple jabs here and there. Nothing crazy. I think he's told me a couple matchups that might be coming after me, but no, it's all in good fun. But him and Ryan, we're in a group thread. Me, him, and Ryan, and I stay out of it. Him and Ryan are jabbing back and forth, and I just I'm quiet. I sort of ignore the texts and just laugh at them. But that's it.
Great stuff, Jack. Thank you for joining us here. Best of luck tonight.
Yep. Thank you.
Probably buy those Empire sandals in the team store, perhaps. Who knows? All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then the Carolina Flyers will wrap up our championship weekend press conferences. Stand by. Now joined by the Carolina Flyers, starting with Mike Dinardis. Coach, thanks for joining us. Good to see you. This team is no stranger to championship weekend, obviously, and you've got a familiar opponent. As you've watched the Empire film, what is the most different about them compared to the last time you played them, and what are the biggest challenges that you expect them to throw at you tonight?
In a lot of ways, they're the same team, just with more powerful pieces. So, I think they'll probably make a few less mistakes and, put a little more pressure on us with their athletes. But, in a lot of ways, they run the same systems. They run a very similar offense. So I think we feel very comfortable in that setting. But yeah, I think they're just overall better, have better talent. So I assume they're going to play a cleaner game, and that's going to be a big part of it, just trying to be a little bit better than we were last year.
You've had success on a lot of different levels in North Carolina, from the youth programs, the college club, AUDL. When you first started out, did you envision this level of success? And is there now like a new bar or a new goal, or is this kind of all gravy?
Yeah, I mean, when I started in North Carolina, it was one of those things where I didn't know where it was going to take us. And it's taken us to like some very interesting places. And, in 2014, we finally like broke through in the college game, but that allowed us to kind of spread our start the coaching seeds to spread. And, we've seen amazing results. I haven't coached UNC in probably 3-4 years now, and they're crushing it. And like the women's team's winning too now. And I think it's like we've kind of germinated everything. And now it's rising to the top levels, the upper levels, and we're starting to see success. So, I think the bar is you're trying to win a championship every year, and that wasn't historically the bar. The bar was just to get there. So now that we won a couple, it's like every year we have to game plan to try to see the opponent's best and be our best. So it's a nice place to be, but it's definitely not easy when everyone's giving you your best shot, but it's a good place to be.
So compared to the New York roster, so much of your roster is homegrown people who've come up through that triangle system. But you also have a few pieces that have kind of sprinkled in this year. Mm-hmm. You've got Coffin, you've got McCutcheon, a couple other guys. What do they bring to the table, and how have you been able to integrate them so efficiently?
Well, first off, they're both, those two guys specifically are super high IQ players. So to get into a system where people have been playing for 5, 6, 7 years, you need to understand the nuance of things pretty quickly. And they do a great job. They're both sponges. They ask a lot of good questions. They ask how they can be their most effective, and that's how people are going to succeed in our system in general. But especially when you're new, you have to absorb a lot coming at you at a very fast pace. And those two guys, just based on their IQs, are ones that can absorb it quickly and perform quickly on the field.
So there's no secret that the Flyers endured a bunch of painful losses on its road to finally winning a championship. Now that you're back, we've talked a little bit about this during the season, but how does it feel different being back here as the reigning champs compared to the team that you finally got the championship weekend back from 2015 last year, but you'd always kind of been grinding, and the Flyers' reputation had been they're going to be good until they lose. And now that you're here as the winners, how does that feel different?
I just think everybody's loose. I think it's as much as you try to dismiss pressure, you do have a lot of pressure until you win. And this team now, I think, just comes in a little more relaxed. I mean, obviously there's going to be pressure no matter what in a big game, but we don't have that pressure of like trying to perform and trying to get over that hump. And the nice bonus is I think a lot of people don't expect us to win this year, and that makes us even, a little more loose, right? Like that makes it even easier to come into this game as like feeling like an underdog again a little bit. Like we don't feel like an underdog, but people perceive us as that. So the pressure's really on New York in that respect.
Your systems kind of have been ingrained, it seems like, for a long time offensively, and I don't know so much defensively, but as you've been coaching for this long and through this ride and winning and doing things, the Carolina way, I guess I would say, do you find yourself learning still a lot, or is it just tweaks? Like, how is it for you? You've gotten all of this experience, and how is your journey as a coach now compared to what it was?
Yeah, I mean, we've done so many things consistently for so long that I'm very comfortable in 80% of what we do. And then we're always trying to throw a new wrinkle in or innovate or learn, and that stuff is still uncomfortable to me and players occasionally. And some of that stuff, it's not like, a lot of it's not coming from me, right? It's coming from the lower ranks. They're like, hey, we tried this at UNC. Like, what do you think about testing it? Or, even like Zog, our GM, sent me like a zone that he was like, maybe this will look good. So it's like constantly getting new things and absorbing them and trying to figure out if they're effective. Like, that's kind of always the challenge of being a coach or a coach that's going to like continue to grow. You should never be happy with your successes. And I think, it's like an 80-20 split. 80% you are pretty comfortable in what you've done historically, but 20% is like what's new that we can throw at somebody that's a wrinkle or, could impact a game.
What does Eric Taylor bring to your group, and how valuable is it that you can just deploy him on O or D?
I mean, you kind of answered it, right? It's like, he's his skill set's so diverse. He can guard anybody. any impact player. He can play our offense. He can be an impact player behind the disc, in front of the disc. It's like Swiss Army knife, right? It's like, what do we need him to do? And you know, it's hard because it's a lot of mental demands out of him, right? Like, it's hard to flip a switch and be very consistent on offense and then be kind of like tenacious on defense. And I mean, but as long as you give him a heads up as to his role in most of the situations, he handles it really well. And that's, you know, he just brings diversity to our, you know, entire team that there's very few players that can do that.
New York's O-line had probably their worst game of the season against DC last weekend. What did you take away from that game after watching the tape?
You know, it's a small sample size thing. Like, I don't think DC did anything crazy to force them into some of the mistakes they were making. I think they made them think for a heartbeat more than most of the time they have been this season. But like marking schemes and downfield schemes, like, it felt like 70% was like on them and 30% was maybe like DC changing things a little bit. So it's hard for me to take like a game plan scheme out of that. It's more like, I think a couple guys had off games versus historicals, and maybe like there's a turn or two by design or scheme in there. So it's like, I don't really think it changes anything that we're going to do based on what they did.
Having coached Jack Williams and Ryan Osgar a bunch,
Those guys, I don't know. Who are
what
those
is
guys?
the key to getting them out of having their best games?
You just have to make them uncomfortable in different ways, right? And I think most people understand, like, pushing Ryan out is going to be a benefit to them. Probably putting Jack more as into the handler set is going to be a benefit to them. But you have to constantly make them think and make them change their the way they attack you versus letting them attack you and you changing the way you dictate to them. So, you know, I think you'll probably see us push Ryan downfield a little bit more, you know, like we have historically, and you know, we're going to try to make Jack think a little more like we generally do, but it's nothing that I think teams that know them don't know that they need to do. So kind of historical stuff.
Is there anything you can throw at those guys that they've never seen you do before?
We'll try. No, I don't. I mean, we have some schemes, but it's not based on them, right? It's based on team.
You haven't really had to cross over many people throughout the season. Do you have a point in which you might do that? I saw you cross over Henry maybe for one D point last weekend. Is that in the works for this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the last weekend of the season, so you just have to let everything out, and you know, we may do that, we may not. It just depends on the situational, you know, score and timing and those kind of things. But yeah, we you know, we have some great top-notch players that can play both ways. So if we need to deploy them a little bit, we may.
Great stuff, Mike. We could ask you questions for hours, but your time's up. Thank you, and best of luck tonight.
All right, I need to shout out to Andrew Lee. Just do that. I don't know why. All right.
Consider it done. Mike Dinardis of the Carolina Flyers. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks.
I don't know if the mic was on, but yeah, we got to come up with a really harsh, mean question. Eric, thanks for being here. Congrats on being back. I mean, I asked Nate Goff the same thing. Like, what has this summer been like for you? You know, practicing with the World Games team, maybe getting the fire lit a little bit from not being on that top 7, just being 8, 9, 10, and it seems like you've played with a different intensity this year. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair to say. Obviously, I like, you know, always looking to push myself and, you know, take whatever fire presents itself as an opportunity. Yeah, World Games experience was definitely a little complicated, like a little bit let down, you know, that I didn't end up making that last 7. In a lot of ways, kind of feels like, you know, I didn't have an awesome tryout, which I kind of, you know, I hold myself accountable for that, but definitely all the opportunities I got to play and exist with that team were really interesting and fun. I think it's cool just to kind of get some of those players under a microscope from up close and see, you know, what's the similarities, what are the differences, how do those people sort of conduct themselves. So that was interesting, but always really, really valuable to like have a team that I, you know, belong to and feel really comfortable on. And I think like going between World Games stuff and then coming back to Flyer stuff was really cool to get to see the differing value to both. And I'm definitely really grateful to have had the experience, but I'm also super glad to be here and be here with my boys. It's a little more comfortable and familiar.
So you're known as a multidimensional player on both offense and defense. So this is a little bit of a multi-part question. Defensively, I would categorize players into block getters or shutdown and like a binary, but there's a spectrum for sure. How would you classify yourself? And then on top of that, with all of your skill sets, how have you kind of gone about developing that? Has that been through identifying role models and trying to copy people, or how has your development into that gone?
Yeah, I think it's a super interesting question. I would say I definitely would classify myself more as a shutdown defender than a block getter. And sort of to segue into the other question you asked is I don't think of myself as somebody who really tries to do things that are outside system. I'm just looking for what is the most broadly what's the right way to do this. That I want my game to emulate as many, with as much detail as possible, the way that we want everybody on our team to play. Now, obviously, I have some athletic gifts that not everybody has, so there are, routes that I take and stuff that people might not recommend, but I try to be excessively fundamental in the way that I do it. And to become a multifaceted player, you got to identify your weaknesses and then work on them with a lot of intention. So I'd say, role model is definitely something that I look to. I try to, dissect. So obviously, spin pulling is one of the things that is pretty obvious about my game. And I saw Christian Foster do it. He's a Carleton alum, as am I. And I was well, why don't I just talk to him? So I talked to him at an alumni weekend event and gave it a shot, and then just sort of tried to keep honing and improving that as much as possible.
So building off the multi-dimensional player bit, Mike has no problem deploying you pretty much anywhere in the Flyers lineup. Obviously, you oblige and are happy to help the team wherever they want you. Where do you feel like you're the most comfortable and add the most value, and why?
I would say I think most comfortable is probably just disc in my hands. I think that that probably feels like somewhere where I love throwing. In college, people used to joke, if you're throwing on the campus quad, for more than 10 minutes, that I'll just pop out of the woodwork somewhere and show up with a disc and start throwing after that. And I kind of like that as a legacy. But I think that it really does vary. I sort of think of myself as a gap filler. We play against a lot of teams and they've got a lot of strengths, and against certain teams there's a matchup that's really good for me, and that I do a better job of maybe than some of our other options. But we also have a huge amount of really talented players on our team, and a lot of times just letting those guys work and doing something that's a little bit less heavy lifting and just more facilitative is the right way to go.
When you're matching up with guys on the Empire, guys that you have experience playing against, like Jack and Ryan and others, I'm sure there are offensive players that you've guarded in your career that you feel you can just stick to like glue and shut down. Are Jack and Ryan guys that you have to defend differently because they are almost, if not as athletically gifted as you?
I would say Jack is. Those guys are definitely maybe more than me. You do me a lot of credit. I appreciate that. But I think my approach to guarding just world-class players like those guys is the margin for error is really low, right? So there's not a lot of opportunity to get cheeky, to get aggressive. It's much more about putting those guys into a box that is where we want them to get. So this is I would say on the sort of spectrum of getting blocks and playing shutdown is you can either get the disc, but a lot of times that can come at the cost of letting them get the disc somewhere where you don't want it to be, right? So obviously in the end zone's not great, but for great throwers like Ryan and Jack, a lot of times them catching it backfield is an outcome that I can encourage a little bit more. They obviously are going to get theirs, and I'm not going to be perfect, but that a lot of times I think has more value than if I get one block, but Jack and Ryan are getting hella up lines on me. That's not really a successful defensive game. So I'm just out here to try to do my best and make as few mistakes as possible.
Eric, obviously, Carolina and New York played in last year's championship game and against each other in finals in the club division, both last year and this summer. Can you talk a little bit about what this New York-Carolina rivalry means to you and where you see this game in that context?
I mean, the rivalry is near and dear to my heart. I've been, really blessed to get to call a lot of those guys, former teammates. I don't know if my short stint on Sub-Zero, I played with Ryan and with Ben and those guys are both good friends. And obviously, Jack, and after World Games, getting to meet a bunch of the New York guys on there, and getting to develop relationships with those guys has been really cool. And I don't know, my greatest motivations for playing the sport are just how good can I get at this? In my definitions of what good means, which are, that's a hugely semantic conversation, probably outside the scope of the interview. But I just really love the way that me and Brian and Saul were all talking pregame about how it's we're just levels deep in the meta, and every time we meet each other, it's just these little adjustments. He did this subtle thing the last game. I wonder how how that's gonna we could potentially leverage that for this. So I'd say the way that the New York game fits into this rivalry is it's just it's another fun chapter. I'm really looking forward to it, and it seems like we're both a little better every time we play, and that's the exciting bit.
I don't think you can put it in better perspective than that, so we'll leave it there. Eric, thanks so much. Best of luck tonight.
Appreciate it.
Eric Taylor of the Carolina Flyers. And we will wrap up our press conferences with Saul Yannick here in just a moment. Saul, thanks for joining us. Thanks for sticking around. We got nobody after you, so aside from letting our crew go to lunch, you can
ramble,
be as talkative as you want. I know, Eric talked about the little micro adjustments that kind of change over the course of one New York-Carolina game to the next. Are there any kind of little adjustments that you are anticipating, that you are thinking about going into this game tonight?
I think a big thing that I can talk about is I just expect both teams to do a decent amount of playing their guys both ways and doing their best to be as heads up with how the other team is rolling out 7 to calibrate who they're putting on for defense, basically. I think New York's offense is designed in a much more sustainable way this year than it was last year. Part of that is adding more pieces around the outside that people haven't noticed who are doing a ton of work, and part of that is just them learning from last year's challenging games. But yeah, I definitely expect they're going to try to steal an O point by getting Ben out on the field when they feel like we don't have a defender who can match up with him. And we will try to do the same by shifting our personnel around based on the flow of the game and based on where we see, a chink in the armor at a given moment. Just a quick follow-up. Can you elaborate on what you think makes the New York offense more sustainable this year than compared to last year? Yeah, I think Charles is a great piece for them. I think he's the connector, solid thrower, gets open, doesn't try to do things beyond his role. He's the type of piece that they were missing last year, that 5 through 7 guy in the line who is going to provide supplemental offense whereas last year it felt like if Ryan or Jack wasn't actively involved in the offense, it was sort of 7 seconds away from a turnover at any given moment. So also last year's team was a very different version of the Empire than we had seen previously. And so Saul and Elliot have gotten a lot more comfortable, and they've trusted those guys more this year than I think last season. Last season, you saw Jack in the backfield almost every single moment they were pressured, and I think there's less of that going on this year. So I think they're just an evolving group and also adding pieces that make them more functional, put less load on their stars.
This is a question kind of about your personal development over the years. It seems like you've gotten very comfortable in your role. When we talked a couple games ago, you talked about how you don't want to put your players in a box and that you have a lot of hybrids that can do everything, handle. But then you kind of jokingly said about yourself, except for me, I'm a handler. Right. Do you feel like you've put yourself in a box in a good way to execute, or how is your journey going from here on out, for you to get better to play your best? Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's sort of 2 pieces here. Thinking about the way that we play offense in North Carolina, I think
the big emphasis for me is like, yes, we have a structure, and other teams are aware of our structure, but the structure is built around decision trees and different breaking points where you can make multiple decisions as a cutter and throw multiple looks as a thrower. So it's not like old school Ironside offense or revolver offense where you are prescribed to do something at all times. It's more like we understand the read that you're going to be seeing, and the challenge to make our offense elite is to make sure that everybody is well versed in those reads and well versed in the the counter and the counter to the counter, which we will inevitably see from the good defenses that we play. I think that personally, like, that applies to me and to Matt in that we are not told run up line, then run to the backfield, catch it in the middle, and then throw another swing to the far side, right? We have flexibility to operate based on what we see, based on how our guy is defending us. So, like, we are certainly not in a box in the backfield. I think for me, my personal development, like, I think, like, the number one thing is I should just be more consistent as a deep thrower. Like, if a team just gives me one of my deep cutters on an island and presents me with an opportunity to throw it deep to a one-on-one, that should just be a goal every time. I think this is something that's sort of been a ebb and flow for my entire career. Like, I've had the opportunity to throw deep a lot on a bunch of different teams I've played for since I was 16 or whatever, and there have been seasons where I felt really automatic, and there are seasons where I felt like I was, less on, but I think just like straightening all that out would be a good step for me. And then the other thing is just continuing to try to be more of a plus on defense. I think that I have areas on defense where I feel really strong, and then there are other areas where I feel like I would like to be less. I would like to be less required to give something up because I'm scared of getting beat in a different direction. Like, be able to take things away in multiple directions more.
Your O-line has been extremely stingy. Not only does the offense not turn it over very much, but when you do turn it over, you give up the fewest breaks of any team in the league. Why is that a characteristic of this O-line?
So I think it's really important that you mentioned that, Charlie. I think we play great O-line D. I think obviously a strength of our team is our D-line offense, and we like to keep teams out there with us with our D-line offense. And so we practice against that all the time, and I think our O-line unit is really stingy as a result of all that practice, and also because you don't get to play on our O-line until you can defend. We just don't put guys out there who are liabilities on defense. So I think that that's something we take a lot of pride in. We have a bunch of fast dudes on our O-line, and it's really tough to get leverage downfield when everyone's being defended by AD and Terrence and Henry and Jacob in the downfield space. And then when they look back at the backfield, if me and Matt are back there, they're not going anywhere. They're not in a better situation there. So, yeah, I think defensively we're super proud of that, and we do our best to make sure our guys are operating in the areas where they're best. Offensively, like, you say we're stingy, like, every game we feel like we're throwing too many turns. Like, every game we're like, oh, we only threw 8 turns that game. Well, you threw 2 turns per quarter? That's terrible. So, I expect us to be at the top of our game this weekend, and I expect us to play 1 or 2 games that are more in line with what we know we can do compared to, the second half of the Austin game or any of those sort of mid-range games we play during the year that get sloppy.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think you've played a game at Breese Stevens
Never.
Field before. What are you most looking forward to about this stadium environment here?
I'm looking forward to the sort of intimate feel. I think last season in DC was really sweet to like see, like, oh, we got broken and now I'm jogging back to try to play another point, and I look up and look, it's us on a giant jumbotron in an MLS stadium. That's unbelievable. But I also think that almost everybody here would say that the best ultimate experiences are when everybody's packed around the field and everybody is feeling the vibration in the air, and it doesn't feel like this big balloon with almost no air in it like it was last year. So I'm excited for that, like, vivid experience that we get when everybody is in the same space and really filling it with energy.
Alex asked a very similar question of Eric. The New York-Carolina rivalry growing and spreading across professional and club. What does tonight's matchup mean in the greater context of the battle between the players from both of those communities?
It's an interesting question. I think like on the club side, it's a little more like the light side versus the dark side. I mean, I guess ironically saying dark side. Like for me, I feel like we want to show that our homegrown team is better than a team of all-stars that get imported to New York, right? Like no shade to Gibran or anybody who's legit from the tri-state area, but like that's a team that's made of guys who are not from New York for the most part. And so we want to assert that our way is best. I think Jack playing for New York and Ryan playing for New York complicates that a little bit on the pro side. But again, I think it's just an inspection of whether our methods are superior enough that the personnel doesn't matter as much as the way that we play and the approach that we take to team building and the approach that we take to putting our guys in positions to succeed. So, and like, I have a ton of love for BJ and for everybody who's like out here challenging my teams and making us be as good as we can be. I don't want this to be like an antagonistic thing, but yeah, I think we feel really strongly about making sure that we are playing in an optimized way. And every time we're given a new challenging stimulus, it's, we have to look in the mirror and figure out where is the inefficiency in how we play and how do we figure out how to iron that out and make us even harder to deal with.
So I think there's a lot of conversation about how you and Matt work so well together in the backfield and take care of the disc and value it. But, I mean, I was looking this morning at Henry Fisher's completion percentage for the year, and Terrence Mitchell's had another great season, and Durs, the few moments he's been on the field this year, I mean, it was perfect last week. How have your cutters valued the disc in a similar way and grown in that area from when you first joined the team?
Yeah, I think... I think I said something similar last year. I think it's a belief in the next guy you're going to look at, right? It's not thinking that when you play great defense, they make you feel like you have to throw a certain look because the next place you're going to look is probably going to be pressured and it's probably going to be hard. But playing great possession offense is all based on trying to create leverage and trying to create a really good option to push the disc down the field. And if you don't get it, then you're just going to look at your next guy and trust that he's going to be doing the right thing, trust that he's going to get the offense into another position of strength. So these guys have been spending all year trying to expand their boxes as throwers, and there have been some practices where Matt and I are standing in the backfield watching turnovers happen over and over again, and we're like, man, last year championship weekend, when they just threw us the reset every time we won championship weekend, we never turned it over. But that's the purpose of practice, is to really discover how good they can be and how expansive their roles can be. So I think that everyone calibrates really well for the big games. And, they're great receivers, man. You can make a mistake throwing and we're still going to bring it down because, again, the receiving talent and the speed on the team is so remarkable.
Yeah, the one guy that I didn't mention in that running through the cutters was Alex Davis, who led the team in goals and could lead the league in goals by the end of the night. What's it like throwing to him?
Oh, it's awesome. It's the best thing is if I overthrow him, I get to mercilessly mock him for the rest of the season, right? So it's a win-win either way. It was funny. We were in Pittsburgh watching Indy play Madison, and Cam put up 5 goals in the fourth quarter of their last game of the regular season, and AD was in shambles watching him pass him in the goals department. So that was very funny. But yeah, AD and Terrence and low-key Jacob Fairfax, all those guys are supremely confident, and it just makes you comfortable, makes you play without fear when you have guys who you're throwing the disc to like that.
Great stuff. We got to let our crew get lunch. Saul, congratulations on being here again, and best of luck tonight, and we're looking forward to it.
Thanks, guys.
Saul sucks.
Shout out to assist GOAT Pavel Giannis.
We thank you for joining us for these pregame press conferences. Coverage begins at 4:30 here from our game day set, and the broadcast begins at 5 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Eastern on AUDL.TV. Championship weekend coming up just a few hours away. See you later.